From South Carolina, Mr. Gowdy, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Judge Poe. There are a lot of issues that I would like to ask you about, Mr. Deputy Attorney General. We had a terrorist incident in New York this week. We have 702 reauthorization that is pending in Congress. Gun violence, the opioid epidemic, criminal justice reform. But when I go home to South Carolina this weekend, trust me when I tell you, no one is going to ask me about any of those issues. They're going to ask me, what in the hell is going on with the Department of Justice and the FBI? The reason we have special counsel, this is a very important point, and you know it, the reason we have special counsel is because of a conflict of interest. The regulation itself specifically makes reference to a conflict of interest. And we don't like conflicts of interest because it undercuts people's confidence in both the process and the result. So let's be really clear why we have special counsel. There was either a real or perceived conflict of interest that we were fearful would either impact the result or people's confidence in the process. That's why we have something called special counsel, and that's why we have special counsel in this fact pattern. And then lo and behold, those who are supposed to make sure there are no conflicts of interest seem to have a few of their own. There's a senior prosecutor who sent obsequious emails to a fact witness. She can be described as nothing other than a fact witness. She's a really important fact witness if you pursue the line of inquiry that my Democrat friends want to pursue. They got off of collusion and now they're on obstruction of justice. She may be the most important fact witness in an obstruction of justice case. And the senior prosecutor for this conflict of interest-free special counsel sent a fawning, obsequious email to a fact witness. And then we have prosecutors assigned to conduct this investigation who donated almost exclusively to one candidate over another. And then we have a prosecutor assigned to this conflict of interest-free team that attended what was supposed to be, what he'd hoped to be, a victory party for Secretary Clinton. And we have a senior DOJ official, Mr. Deputy Attorney General, with an office that used to be 2 doors down from yours, meeting with Fusion GPS. And Fusion GPS, of course, was paying for Russian dirt on the very person that they're supposed to be objectively investigating. And then that same senior DOJ official's wife, the one that met with Fusion GPS, his wife was on the payroll of Fusion GPS. And then we have a senior agent assigned to investigate Secretary Clinton's email, help draft the exoneration letter where we changed the language from grossly negligent to extremely careless, interviewed Secretary Clinton in an interview I've never seen, and I doubt you have either in your career as a prosecutor, interviewed Michael Flynn, was actively involved in the investigation into the Trump campaign before the Inspector General found his text. So this agent, in the middle of almost everything related to Secretary Clinton and President Trump, sent pro-Clinton texts, anti-Trump texts to his paramour in response to being told maybe he is where he is to protect the country from that menace, Donald Trump. He said, I can protect our country at many levels. And then he said Hillary Clinton should win 100 million to nothing. Now think about that, Mr. Deputy Attorney General. That's a pretty overwhelming victory. 100 million to 0. And when I read that last night, what I thought was this conflict of interest-free senior agent of the FBI can't think of a single solitary American who would vote for Donald Trump. That's where the 0 comes in. Not a single solitary American he can imagine would vote for Donald Trump. This is the conflict of interest-free special agent assigned. And then he went on, if that weren't enough, to belittle Trump supporters by saying he could smell them at a Walmart in Virginia. This is the person we needed to avoid a conflict of interest. And then he said this, they fully deserve to go and demonstrate the absolute bigoted nonsense of Trump. But he wasn't content to just disparage Donald Trump. He had to disparage Donald Trump's family. This is what he said, Mr. Deputy Attorney General. He said, the douchebags are about to come out. He's talking about our First Lady and children, this conflict of interest-free special agent of the FBI. This is who we were told we needed to have an objective, impartial, fair, conflict of interest-free investigation. So he's openly pulling for the candidate he had a role in clearing, and he's openly investigating a candidate that he has bias against. And then if that's not enough, he says Trump is an effing idiot. What the F just happened to our country? This is the same man that said he would save our country. What happens when people who are supposed to cure the conflict of interest have even greater conflicts of interest than those they replace? That's not a rhetorical question. You nor I nor anyone else would ever sit Peter Strzok on a jury. We wouldn't have him objectively, dispassionately investigate anything knowing what we know now. Why didn't we know it ahead of time? And my last question, my final question to you, and I appreciate the chairman's patience, how would you help me answer that question when I go back to South Carolina this weekend?
Congressman, first of all, with regard to the special counsel, Mr. Strzok was already working on the investigation when the special counsel was appointed. The appointment that I made was of Robert Mueller. So what I'd recommend that you tell your constituents is that Robert Mueller and Rod Rosenstein and Chris Wray are accountable, and that we will ensure that no bias is reflected in any of the actions taken by the special counsel or in any matter within the jurisdiction of the Department of Justice. When we have evidence of any inappropriate conduct, we're going to take action on it. And that's what Mr. Mueller did here. As soon as he learned about this issue, he took action. And that's what I anticipate that the rest of our prosecutors, our new group of U.S. attorneys, our Justice Department appointees, they understand the rules and they understand the responsibility to defend the integrity of the department. And if they find evidence of improper conduct, they're going to take action. So, Congressman, that's the best assurance I can give you. But actually, there's one other point, which is you should tell your constituents that we exposed this issue because we're ensuring that the Inspector General conducts a thorough and effective investigation. And if there is any evidence of impropriety, he's going to surface it and report about it publicly.
Trey Gowdy pressed Rosenstein on the reports of bias on the Mueller-Russia investigative team. Here's a bit more of that.
So let's be really clear why we have special counsel. There was either a real or perceived conflict of interest that we were fearful would either impact the result or people's confidence in the process. And then lo and behold, those who are supposed to make sure there are no conflicts of interest seem to have a few of their own. There's a senior prosecutor who sent obsequious emails to a fact witness. She's a really important fact witness if you pursue the line of inquiry that my Democrat friends want to pursue. They got off of collusion and now they're on obstruction of justice.
So here exclusively on the story tonight, House Judiciary Member Trey Gowdy. Congressman, welcome. I believe that you were referring to Sally Yates there and the email that she received from Andrew Weissman congratulating her on not defending the Trump ban and saying that he was in awe of her, I think are the words he used. So you pressed Rod Rosenstein on this today. Were you satisfied with the answer that you got to that question?
A little bit, but you know, he was explaining all day. This is a really bad fact pattern. I hate it for Rod Rosenstein that he's the one explaining it because he's not Peter Strzok and he's not Andy McCabe and he's not Jim Comey, so he's having to do a little bit of cleanup. But these are really bad facts if you care about an impartial, objective Department of Justice and FBI.
All right, I want to go to the other part of the text messages that goes to this question of conspiracy, because as Ed Henry laid out, the timeline on all of this is very problematic. This is a text message from Peter Strzok to Lisa Page. I want to believe the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office, that there's no way he gets elected, but I'm afraid we can't take that risk. It's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event that you die before you're 40. Now, you know, obviously everyone's going to try to figure out what he was going to do to make sure that you couldn't take that risk. But it would help everyone to understand that at the time that he said that, he was investigating Hillary Clinton to decide whether or not they were going to pursue charges against her.
Yes, ma'am. I'm still trying to figure out why 3 FBI agents are discussing politics in the deputy director's office, because you're not supposed to discuss politics on federal ground, and FBI agents aren't supposed to engage in politics for Hatch Act reasons. Remember, we were supposed to interview Andy McCabe yesterday on another committee. It was all set up and ready to go, and then at the last minute they said, he can't come Tuesday. He's going to come next week. I'll be shocked if he comes next week. I'll be a little bit surprised if he's still an employee of the FBI this time next week. But the notion that 3 Bureau agents would be conspiring or plotting on how to handle the outcome of a presidential election is the opposite of what you want in an objective, dispassionate, neutral FBI.
All right, so you said that when you go home to South Carolina next week, you're going to get a lot of questions about all of
Yes,
this.
ma'am.
And I would imagine that your constituents are going to want to know, so what happens? What happens now? How are they going to right this ship?
They will want to know that, and they will want to know whether or not we can trust or rely upon what Robert Mueller comes up with. And I have been very defensive of Robert Mueller from day one, even up until as recently as a week ago. But he hired some people that have terrible bias, and he didn't have to. There are plenty of women and men who don't contribute to political campaigns. There are plenty of prosecutors he could have hired. So at some point, Bob Mueller is going to have to explain, how did he vet these prosecutors and agents? How did these folks slip by? Because what's going to happen, Martha, is if he decides to do something to the Trump campaign or prosecute President Trump, Republicans have a built-in argument for bias, that the fix was in from day one. And if he clears President Trump, then the Democrats are going to say, well, the pressure from the Republicans was so unrelenting. He's in a no-win situation, but he's there because of some of the decisions he's made.
Yeah. Do you think that conspiracy point that we just talked about, does that lay the groundwork for any Hatch Act investigation, do you think, before I let you go?
Well, I think using an official phone to discuss politics is a Hatch Act violation. That's my old job, but it is incredibly problematic that you are in the deputy. Remember, Jim Comey gets very sanctimonious when you talk to him about a politicized FBI. Very sanctimonious. Well, guess what? In his deputy director's office, they were discussing how to prevent one candidate from becoming president of the United States. It doesn't get any more political than that.
That they wanted some kind of insurance policy against that potential eventuality, which they obviously all found an atrocious idea. Trey Gowdy.
Almost as bad as Ted Cruz. Almost as bad
Almost
as Ted
as bad,
Cruz.
right? Congressman, thank you so much. Always good to talk to you.